Commander Daniel Rourke sat in the quiet cabin of his ship, staring out the wide viewing window. Beyond the glass stretched the stars, endless and cold, scattered like dust across the black sea of space. He had seen many stars in his years of service, but tonight they looked sharper, brighter, as if they were watching him. The weight of the mission pressed on his shoulders, heavier than the uniform he wore. Humanity was still young in the galactic stage, barely 2 decades into first contact, and now the eyes of a mighty empire would be judging them. The Empire of Vale had ruled a quarter of the galaxy for thousands of years. Their fleets were massive, their technology ancient and refined, their pride greater than any other species. Humans were newcomers, children at the galactic table, tolerated but not yet respected. Daniel knew this. He had been chosen not because he was the strongest soldier or the cleverest diplomat, but because he was calm, steady, and unwilling to lose his temper. Earth's leaders believed that what humanity needed now was not a loud voice, but a patient one. His ship docked at the grand orbital station of the Vale. The structure was vast, larger than any city on Earth, shaped like a glowing crown suspended in the void. Tens of thousands of ships moved in careful order around it, each reflecting the golden light that radiated from the station's core. Daniel stepped off the ship with measured steps, his boots clicking against the polished silver floor. Behind him walked a small team of human envoys, nervous but determined. The hall they entered was not made for humans. It was colossal, with ceilings so high that clouds of mist floated inside. Towering pillars carved with strange symbols lined the way, glowing faintly as if alive. Alien nobles in long robes stood on either side, their eyes watching the humans with cold curiosity. Some whispered to each other, their voices sharp and mocking. To them, humans were little more than amusing animals who had learned to walk in the stars. At the far end of the hall sat the throne of Vale, high and gleaming, carved from a single block of black crystal. Upon it rested the Empress, her form tall and graceful, her 4 eyes gleaming like fire. But Daniel's gaze was drawn not to her, but to the young figure standing at her side. The Prince, Kale, was only 19 years old, but among his people that was the age of ascension. His body was lean, his skin shimmering with a silver hue that caught the light like polished metal. He wore a crown of thin blades that curved upward, dangerous yet elegant. His eyes burned with arrogance, the kind of pride only the young and powerful could carry. He looked down at the humans as if they were insects crawling across his polished floor. The court grew silent as the Empress raised her hand. Her voice echoed through the chamber, deep and commanding yet calm. She welcomed the humans in formal words, acknowledging Earth's presence as part of the Galactic Council. Daniel bowed, careful not to show weakness but also not to offend. He answered her in measured tones, speaking of peace, cooperation, and the desire to learn. The nobles listened without care. They had heard these words before from other new species. Most races that joined the galactic community were eager to prove themselves, desperate for approval. The humans were nothing special to them, but Prince Kale had grown restless. His young pride itched at the idea of giving respect to such a fragile-looking creature. He stepped forward, his voice sharp, his words filled with venom. "This is humanity? These are the creatures who think they belong among stars forged by empires older than their sun? Look at them. Their skin is soft, their bones fragile. They are infants, yet they dare to stand in this hall." The court erupted in cruel laughter. Alien nobles clapped their long hands, their voices rising in mocking agreement. Some whispered cruel jokes, others smirked openly. To them, the prince had only spoken the truth. Humans were small, young, and untested. Daniel stood still, his face calm, his hands clasped behind his back. He did not speak. He did not defend himself. He simply looked at the prince with steady eyes. Kyle's words grew sharper, his tone louder, feeding on the laughter of the court. "You ask for peace, but what can you give? You ask for friendship, but what do you offer? Your ships are weak. Your weapons are toys. If war came, you would be dust before the first dawn. Why should we bow to the noise of children?" The mocking grew louder, the hall filled with cruel joy. The nobles expected the human to break, to lose his temper, to shout or beg. That was the game of power in the Vale court, to insult until the other side revealed weakness. Daniel could feel the eyes of his team behind him, tense and angry. He could almost hear their hearts pounding, waiting for him to respond. But Daniel did nothing. He let the words fall, let them cut, let them echo. Then with slow and deliberate movement he gave a small nod. His eyes met Kale's for a brief moment, calm, unshaken, and unreadable. Without a word, he turned his back on the prince and walked away. His boots echoed against the crystal floor, each step steady, each step defiant in its silence. The hall grew quiet. The laughter died, replaced by whispers of confusion. The game had changed. No one had expected this. A human, mocked and insulted before the Empire, had chosen not to play. He had not begged, not shouted, not even defended his species. He had simply walked away as if the prince's words were not even worth an answer. Kale's face twisted with rage. To him, silence was worse than anger. To be ignored was an insult greater than any spoken word. He shouted after Daniel, his voice cracking with youthful fury, but the human did not turn back. The sound of boots on crystal faded into the great hall until only silence remained. The Empress watched with narrowed eyes. Around her, the nobles whispered, some calling the human weak, others calling him strange. But beneath the surface of mockery, a seed of doubt had been planted. What kind of species could be insulted in the heart of the greatest empire and yet refuse to show fear? What did that silence mean? Some wondered if the humans were too naive to understand, but others felt unease. Perhaps silence was not weakness. Perhaps it was something else. Daniel returned to his ship with his team in silence. They looked at him with questions in their eyes, but he said nothing until the station lay behind them, and the stars stretched wide once more. Only then did he speak, his voice calm. Do not answer every insult. Sometimes silence is the loudest voice. His team nodded slowly, though some still carried frustration. They wanted to fight, to defend Earth's name, but Daniel knew better. The court had wanted a reaction, and he had denied them that satisfaction. Now the galaxy would wonder, and wondering was more powerful than any word he could have spoken. Far behind, in the great hall of Vale, Prince Kale seethed with rage. His pride had been wounded not by words but by the absence of them. And in his fury he made a silent vow. The humans would regret this. He would show the galaxy their weakness. He would break their silence with fire. But Daniel, sitting quietly in the dark of his cabin, watching the stars once more, already knew the truth. Strength was not always in power. Sometimes strength was in restraint. And in walking away, he had given humanity something no insult could take: dignity. Daniel Rourke sat in his chair aboard the Odyssey, the human diplomatic ship that carried him and his team. The station of Vale was now only a distant glimmer, swallowed slowly by the stars as they drifted away. The hall was behind them, but the weight of what had happened lingered. His officers whispered among themselves, some angry, some confused. To them, silence had felt like surrender, but Daniel knew better. He had seen the looks in the noble's eyes. He had seen the sudden shift in the Empress's expression. Silence had left questions, and questions were more dangerous than anger. His second officer, Lieutenant Harris, finally spoke what others had been thinking. "Sir, with respect, the prince insulted us." The court laughed. "We looked weak. The galaxy will see this as weakness." His tone was tight, his fists clenched. He was a young man like the prince, hot-blooded and eager to prove himself. Daniel turned his gaze from the stars and looked at Harris. "And what would you have had me do? Shout? Argue? Strike him?" That is what they wanted. They wanted us to break. But we are not their game pieces. We will not dance for their amusement. The young officer said no more, though the frustration still burned in his eyes. The others remained quiet. Daniel leaned back, letting the silence settle once again. Unseen to the humans far across the station, Prince Kale fumed in his chambers. He paced like a trapped predator, his silver skin glimmering in the glow of the crystal walls. To be ignored was a wound his pride could not bear. He replayed the human's calm gaze in his mind, the small nod, the way he had walked away without fear. To Kale it was not silence. It was insult. It was defiance. His advisors urged him to let it go. "They are children of the stars," they said. "Do not waste your anger on insects." But Kale's pride was louder than wisdom. He clenched his fists, his young voice sharp with fury. "No one ignores a Prince of Vale. If they will not bow to words, then we will break them with trials. Let the galaxy see their weakness." He summoned a fleet captain loyal to him and gave secret orders. Human ships would be tested, but not an open war. It would be disguised as an exercise, a routine patrol where accidents could happen. If humans broke, Kale would have his victory. If they resisted, then he would escalate further. Either way, he would not allow silence to stand. Days later, the Odyssey received a transmission from the Empire of Vale. It was polite, wrapped in the smooth words of diplomacy. A joint training exercise, they called it. Human ships would fly alongside Vale cruisers, testing coordination, testing discipline. To others, it looked like a gesture of respect, a chance to welcome humans into galactic routines. But Daniel knew better. He read the lines not spoken, felt the trap hidden beneath the gold. Still he accepted. To refuse would look like fear. And fear was not the lesson he wanted the galaxy to learn about humanity. The appointed day came. The Odyssey joined with two smaller human frigates, the Ares and the Vigilant. They moved into formation beside three Vale cruisers, vast ships of polished silver and black, bristling with weapons that made human ships look like toys. The void stretched around them, empty and silent, waiting. The training began simple enough. Maneuvers, formations, simulated attacks against holographic targets. The Vale moved like dancers, precise and rigid, each motion drilled into them by centuries of tradition. The humans moved differently. Their ships twisted, darted, shifted positions with sudden changes that seemed chaotic but always carried purpose. Where the Vale saw disorder, Daniel saw adaptability. At first, the Vale captains mocked. Humans cannot even hold formation, one sneered over the comms. Kale, watching from his private chamber, smirked. Now you will see their weakness. Then came the real test. Without warning, the Vale cruisers turned their weapons, not toward holograms, but toward the human frigates. Energy beams lit the dark, missing by narrow margins. Officially, it was accidental targeting, a malfunction. But Daniel knew it was deliberate. Kale was watching, hungry for a reaction. "Sir, they're firing at us." Harris shouted. "Hold fire," Daniel ordered. His voice was calm, unshaken. "Evasive maneuvers. Stay alive, but do not return fire." The frigates obeyed. The Ares rolled aside as a beam scorched past, the Vigilant twisting sharply to slip between two bursts of plasma. The humans moved like no Vale captain expected. They improvised, weaving patterns that no algorithm could predict. Their ship seemed weak, yet they refused to fall. Kale's smirk faded as he watched. This was not panic. This was not collapse. It was survival. "Push harder," he hissed to his captain. "Crush them. Break their spirit." The Vale cruisers closed in, tightening the trap. The humans seemed surrounded, caught in a web of fire. But then Daniel gave quiet orders, almost whispers. "Now, break pattern 7. The frigates split suddenly, diving in opposite directions, their movements wild and unpredictable. The Odyssey surged forward, threading a narrow gap between the cruisers, its shields glowing as weapons grazed them. In seconds, the humans were out of the trap. The Vale formation, too rigid, could not adjust in time. Their beams struck empty space. The court of Vale, watching the feed, murmured in surprise. Kale's fist tightened. He had expected weakness. Instead, he saw something else, flexibility. A kind of strength his people did not understand. The exercise ended in silence. The Vale claimed success, pretending it had been nothing but a harmless test. But whispers spread quickly. The humans had not fired a single shot, yet they had survived against odds meant to crush them. Other alien observers watching the data feeds began to talk. "They move like no one else," one said. "They think like no one else," said another. Back aboard the Odyssey, Daniel listened to his crew's excited voices. They spoke of how close it had been, of how unfair the test had been. Some wanted to protest to the council, to reveal the truth, but Daniel raised his hand. "No, let them whisper. Let them wonder. Truth spreads faster when it is not shouted." His officers fell silent, but this time it was not the silence of doubt. It was the silence of respect. Far away in his chamber, Kyle stared at the recording. His pride burned hotter than ever. He had tried to humiliate the humans, but instead he had given them a stage. He clenched his jaw, his young voice shaking with rage. "They will not make a fool of me again. If they will not bow with words, if they will not break in trials, then I will crush them myself." The Empress, though silent, watched with thoughtful eyes. She had seen what her son refused to see. Humanity was not weak. They were different, and different was dangerous. The stars outside remained calm, eternal, but the ripples of what had happened spread across the galaxy. Some still laughed at humans. Others began to ask new questions. What kind of species ignored insults, survived traps, and still refused to fire in anger? What kind of strength was that? Daniel Rourke stood once again at the window of the Odyssey. The stars outside looked peaceful, but he knew peace was only an illusion. After the training exercise with the Veil fleet, nothing felt calm anymore. His crew was restless, his officers were suspicious, and messages from Earth asked him to explain the strange events. Officially, the Veil had called it a success, but Daniel knew the truth. It had been a trap, and they had survived it. Lieutenant Harris still paced the deck like a caged animal. His young face burned with frustration. "Sir, they tried to humiliate us. They could have destroyed us, and we just let it pass as a test? With respect, we cannot keep letting them push us." Daniel turned to him. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "What do you think would happen if we accused the Veil openly? Do you think the Council would believe us? They see us as children. If we shout, they will say we are throwing tantrums." "No, Harris. Sometimes the best way to fight is not to fight at all." The lieutenant looked unconvinced, but he said nothing more. What Daniel did not know was that far away, Prince Kale was already planning his next move. The failure of the test gnawed at his pride like a wound. He sat in his private chamber aboard a royal cruiser, his crown of blades tilted slightly, his silver eyes burning. Around him, his advisors begged him to let it go. "Your Highness," one elder said carefully, "the Empress already doubts your methods. If you continue, you may bring shame on yourself." But Kale slammed his hand against the table. "I will not be ignored." That human, Daniel Rourke, thinks silence is strength. He thinks walking away makes him superior. No. I will show him that silence breaks under pressure. I will crush him in front of all. The elder bowed his head, but his eyes carried fear. He knew the prince's arrogance was dangerous. But Kale would not listen. He had already decided. Within weeks, rumors began to spread across the stars. Pirates raiding trade routes near human colonies. Strange accidents at border patrols. Reports of Veil ships protecting regions close to human space. The whispers grew. Some said the humans were being tested. Others said they were being pushed to war. Daniel read the reports with a heavy heart. He knew the prince's hand was behind them, though no proof existed. Every incident was wrapped in layers of excuses and lies. But he also knew Kale would not stop. The prince wanted a reaction. He wanted humanity to lash out so he could paint them as reckless and dangerous. One night, as the Odyssey floated in quiet orbit around a neutral world, Daniel gathered his officers. The room was dim, lit only by the soft blue glow of the stars outside. His team looked tired, their faces hard. "They are trying to push us into war," Daniel said simply. "But we will not give them that satisfaction." Commander Lee, his navigation officer, frowned. "Sir, what if they do more than tests? What if they attack directly?" Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then we will survive. Not by matching their strength, but by using what they do not understand. We will adapt. We will endure. And that will frighten them more than any weapon." The officers nodded slowly. Some still looked doubtful, but they trusted him. Across the galaxy, Kale prepared his move. He demanded a formal challenge, invoking an ancient tradition of the Veil. It was rare, almost forgotten, but still honored. A duel, not of fleets but of leaders. One champion against another, before the eyes of the court and the council. Victory would mean honor. Defeat would mean shame. To Kale, this was perfect. If the human refused, he would be called a coward. If he accepted, he would die. Either way, Kale would win. The message arrived on the Odyssey. Harris read it aloud, disbelief in his voice. "Sir, they are challenging you. Personally. A duel. In front of the entire court." The room went silent. Everyone turned to Daniel. They expected him to refuse. It was madness. The Veil Prince was stronger, faster, raised in traditions of combat. No human could stand against him. But Daniel did not hesitate. He simply said, "I accept." The officers erupted in protest. Harris stepped forward, his voice raised. "Sir, you can't. He'll kill you. This is what he wants." Daniel raised a hand and the room fell quiet. His voice was steady like stone. "This is not about me. It is about humanity. If I refuse, they will call us weak. If I accept and lose, they will call us reckless. But if I accept and endure, if I stand and do not break, then the galaxy will see us differently. This is not about victory. It is about dignity." No one argued after that. The day of the duel came quickly. The Hall of Veil was filled with nobles, their eyes bright with hunger for spectacle. Other alien delegates filled the balconies, eager to see what the humans would do. Whispers echoed like wind through the chamber. Most believed the human would fall in seconds. Some even laughed, placing bets on how long he would last. At the center of the hall, the dueling circle shimmered with energy. Weapons of tradition lay on a stand, blades curved like talons, staffs glowing with faint light, shields thin as glass but strong as steel. Prince Kael entered first, tall and shining, his crown glinting like fire. He moved with the arrogance of youth, every step loud with pride. The court cheered him, their voices rising like thunder. He raised his blade and saluted, his silver eyes burning with triumph before the fight even began. Then Daniel entered. He wore no crown, no armor of gold, only the simple dark uniform of Earth Command. His face was calm, his step steady, his eyes quiet. The court fell silent for a moment, surprised by the lack of fear in his movements. He picked up a plain staff, ignoring the brighter weapons. He bowed slightly, then stood ready. The Empress gave the signal. The duel began. Kael moved first, swift as lightning, his blade flashing down in a strike meant to end the fight instantly. Daniel barely blocked it, the staff trembling in his hands. The crowd roared, certain it would be over in moments. But Daniel did not fall. He stepped back, steadying himself, his eyes still calm. Kael struck again and again, each swing faster, stronger, more furious. Sparks flew as blade met staff, the sound ringing across the hall. Daniel's arms ached, his breath grew heavy, but he did not break. He blocked, dodged, endured. Minutes passed. The crowd grew restless. The human should have fallen, yet he still stood. Kael's face twisted with anger. He attacked harder, his strikes wild now, desperate to end what should have been easy. But Daniel waited, patient, watching. He moved only as much as needed, conserving strength, letting the prince's fury burn itself away. At last, Kael stumbled slightly, his blade swinging too wide. In that instant, Daniel stepped inside the strike, his staff at the prince's throat. The hall gasped. The human had the killing blow, but Daniel did not strike. He froze, his eyes steady, his chest rising and falling with heavy breath. Slowly, he lowered the staff. He stepped back, leaving Kael standing, humiliated but alive. Silence filled the hall. No one laughed now. The nobles stared, the delegates whispered. A human had stood against the prince and endured. More than that, he had spared him when victory was his. The Empress rose slowly, her 4 eyes shining. She said nothing, but her gaze lingered on Daniel with something new. Not mockery, not disdain, something like respect. Kael, trembling with rage and shame, lowered his blade. His pride was shattered, yet his life spared. The duel was over, but its echo had only begun. The duel had ended, but its echo moved across the galaxy like a wave. In the Hall of Vale, silence still lingered. Nobles who had once mocked now whispered in uneasy tones. Delegates who had expected a quick death for the human now studied him with new eyes. The Empress herself, tall and powerful on her black crystal throne, kept her gaze fixed on Daniel Rourke. Her face revealed nothing, but her silence spoke louder than words. Daniel walked out of the dueling circle with calm steps. His arms ached, his lungs burned, but his face showed none of it. His team watching from the edge of the hall wanted to cheer, but they held their voices. This was not the place for celebration. This was the place where dignity mattered more than noise. Prince Kael stood frozen where he had been spared. His silver skin glistened with sweat, his crown tilted slightly, his pride shattered. To be beaten was shame. To be spared was worse. It was mercy, and mercy tasted like poison to him. His jaw tightened as he lowered his blade. The laughter he had once fed on was gone. Now he felt only eyes on him, watching, judging, whispering. The Empress rose, her robes flowing like fire. She lifted her hand and the hall fell silent. Her 4 eyes glowed faintly as she spoke. The duel is done. The challenge has been met. The matter is closed. Her voice was calm but sharp as glass. It carried the weight of finality. None dared to question it. Daniel bowed his head slightly, then turned and left the circle. His team followed him quickly, their hearts pounding with pride. In silence, they walked out of the hall, past nobles who no longer dared to laugh. Once aboard the Odyssey, the crew finally let their emotions show. Harris was the first to speak, his voice filled with awe. "Sir, you could have killed him. You had him. Why didn't you strike?" Daniel sat down slowly in his chair, rubbing his sore arms. His voice was steady. "Because killing him would have proven nothing. If I had struck him down, they would call me lucky or savage. But by sparing him, I showed them something they cannot understand. Mercy is strength." The room fell quiet. The officers nodded, some slowly, some with fierce agreement. They knew he was right. But far away in his private chambers, Prince Kael raged. He struck the walls with his fists, his blade cutting deep marks into the crystal floor. His advisors watched in silence, afraid to speak. His pride had been torn apart before the galaxy. The human had not just beaten him, he had humiliated him by showing restraint. "I will not forgive this," Kael hissed. His young voice trembled with fury. "The human thinks mercy is power? Then I will show him power without mercy. I will show him what it means to defy the blood of Vale." His advisors warned him again. "Your Highness, the Empress forbade further action. To move against the human now would be defiance of her word." Kael's silver eyes burned. "Then I will not act openly, but I will act." He began to plot in secret, gathering captains loyal to him, whispering promises of glory. If the court would not punish the human, then he would. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, whispers spread. The duel was retold in countless ways. Some races laughed, saying the prince had underestimated the human. Others spoke in hushed voices, saying humanity was different. They were not the strongest, not the oldest, not the most advanced, but they were unpredictable. They endured, and they showed mercy in a galaxy where mercy was rare. For the first time, humanity was not seen as children. They were seen as something more. Something uncertain, something dangerous. Daniel noticed the change quickly. Messages arrived from distant ambassadors, some curious, some respectful. A few even asked for alliances, but he remained careful. Respect could turn to fear, and fear could turn to hostility. He knew the galaxy was watching, waiting to see what humans would do next. One evening, as Daniel sat alone in his cabin, Harris entered quietly. The young officer looked uncertain, his anger of the past replaced by thoughtfulness. "Sir," he began, "I think I understand now. Back in the hall when the prince insulted us and you walked away. That was the same as the duel, wasn't it? You didn't fight because fighting would give them what they wanted." Daniel looked up at him, a small, tired smile touching his lips. "Yes, sometimes the hardest choice is to do nothing, but it is also the strongest. Walking away tells them we are not their game pieces. Mercy tells them we are not bound by their rules." Harris nodded slowly. The lesson sank deeper than before, but while Daniel taught patience, Kael taught hatred. The young prince's plots began to grow. He sent ships in secret, disguised as pirates, to harass human colonies. He spread lies through the networks of the galaxy, claiming humanity sought to destabilize peace. He wanted the galaxy to fear humans, not with respect but with anger. One of these false raids struck a small human outpost near the edge of settled space. Families had to flee into bunkers, supply lines were cut, and panic spread. Though no lives were lost, the message was clear. Humanity was being targeted. Reports reached Daniel quickly. His officers were furious. Harris slammed his fist against the table. "This is too far. We can't just endure forever. If we don't act, they'll think we're cowards." Daniel's eyes hardened. "We will act, but not in anger. We will act in a way they do not expect." He called for a quiet investigation. Human intelligence officers worked carefully, tracing signals, examining debris, studying patterns. Slowly, the truth began to surface. The so-called pirates were too organized, their weapons too refined. Behind the mask of raiders lay the hand of the Veil, and behind the Veil forces lay the shadow of Prince Kael. Daniel kept this knowledge close, sharing it only with his most trusted officers. "We cannot accuse without proof," he said. "But when the time comes, the truth will reveal itself." The tension built with every passing day. Humanity's colonies grew nervous. The council whispered of war, and the galaxy watched as two paths stretched ahead, conflict or restraint. The Empress of Vale, though silent, began to suspect her son's hand. She had seen his pride, his fury, his shame. She said nothing, but her gaze grew colder each time she looked upon him, and still Daniel remained calm. He spoke to his crew, to the colonies, to the council. His words were steady, always the same. "We will not be the ones to start this war. We will endure, and endurance is the seed of victory." But Kael could no longer endure his shame. He prepared his boldest plan yet, a direct strike, one that would force humanity to respond. In his young mind, it was the only way to restore his pride. The galaxy balanced on the edge of silence. Humanity had walked away from insults. They had survived traps. They had endured a duel. But now, as Kael's shadow reached further, the test would grow harsher than ever. The galaxy waited for the storm to break. For weeks, whispers turned into rumors, and rumors turned into fear. Human colonies reported strange movements near their borders. Merchant ships vanished. Messages of warning came from distant allies who had once stayed silent. Daniel Rourke sat in the command chair of the Odyssey. His eyes were calm, but his mind was sharp. He had seen the signs. He knew Prince Kale's pride would not rest. The young royal wanted revenge, and revenge was now close. Reports came in from the intelligence officers. They showed maps of space, lines of travel, coded transmissions. The evidence pointed to Kale's secret fleet. It was hidden, but not well enough. The prince was preparing for war. His officers argued around the table. "We cannot wait any longer," Harris said, his voice hot with anger. "If we don't strike first, he will destroy our colonies." Commander Silva shook her head. "If we strike first, the galaxy will see us as aggressors. We will lose the respect we just gained. We must be careful." Daniel raised his hand and the room grew quiet. His voice was steady. "We will not start this war, but we will end it if it comes to us. Kale wants us to act in rage. He wants us to prove his lies. We will not give him that gift." The crew listened, their faith tested but still firm. They had seen before that patience could be strength. Far away, Kale stood before his fleet. Dozens of ships, black and silver, floated like knives in the dark. His young face burned with fury. His advisors begged caution, but Kale would not listen. "They think mercy is power," he said, his voice sharp. "They think walking away is strength. I will break them. I will make the galaxy see what happens when a human dares to shame the blood of Vale." He gave the order. His fleet moved toward a human colony world. New Horizon, a place of farms, children, and untrained defenders. It was not a battle. It was meant to be a massacre, but Daniel had already guessed Kale's move. Scouts had reported strange signals near New Horizon. The Odyssey and a small task force of human ships raced across space, engines burning, hearts steady. When Kale's fleet arrived at the colony, they found not fear, but resistance. Human defense ships, smaller and weaker, stood between the colony and the Royal Armada. Kyle laughed when he saw them. "Fools," he said. "They send toys against my blades." He gave the order to attack. The battle began. Human ships fought with courage. They were slower, but they moved with creativity. Where Vale ships relied on power, humans relied on tricks. Hiding in asteroid fields, creating false signals, using their small size to slip through gaps. Every shot counted. Every maneuver was designed to protect the colony below. On the bridge of the Odyssey, Daniel gave calm orders. "Hold the line. Do not chase. Make them waste their strength." His voice never rose, even as explosions shook the ship. Harris shouted, "Sir, their numbers are too many. We can't hold forever." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "We don't need forever. We need just enough." And just enough came. As Kale pressed his fleet forward, the Empress of Vale arrived. Her own ships, vast and powerful, dropped from faster-than-light travel surrounding the battlefield. Kale froze in shock. "Mother?" His voice broke with fear. The Empress's voice thundered across the comms, reaching every ship. "Prince Kale, son of my blood, you defy my word. You bring war to the galaxy for your pride. You shame your people, and you shame me." Her ships turned their guns not on the humans, but on Kale's fleet. Kale's captains hesitated. Some tried to fight. Others surrendered at once. The fleet began to break apart. Kale screamed in fury. "No, this is my victory. Mine." He turned his ship toward the Odyssey, desperate for one final strike. On the human bridge, alarms rang as Kale's flagship charged. Harris shouted, "He's coming straight at us." Daniel stood tall. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. "Hold steady." The flagship fired. Bright energy tore across the void. The Odyssey shook, shields burning. Smoke filled the air. Daniel gave one order. "Return fire." The human guns blazed. They struck Kale's ship again and again. Panels burst, flames spread, and the flagship began to fall apart. For one last moment, Kyle appeared on the screen. His silver face was twisted with rage and despair. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." Daniel met his eyes with calm. "No, you killed yourself." The screen went dark as Kale's flagship exploded, scattering pieces into the void. Silence filled the bridge of the Odyssey. The battle was over. Humanity had endured. The Empress spoke again, her voice colder now. "Humans, your strength is not in your weapons, but in your spirit. My son did not see this. I see it now. You have my respect." Her ships withdrew, taking the remains of Kale's forces with them. The galaxy had witnessed the truth. In the days that followed, stories spread faster than light. The humans had stood against the blood of Vale and survived. They had faced arrogance with patience, power with endurance, hate with mercy, and they had won. Daniel Rourke became a name known across stars. Some called him the man who walked away. Others called him the man who spared. To his crew, he was simply their captain, steady and unbroken. One night, as the Odyssey drifted in quiet space, Harris came to him again. "Sir," he said softly, "I used to think walking away was weakness. I thought mercy made us small. But I see it now. It makes us strong, stronger than they will ever understand." Daniel looked out at the stars. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Remember this, Harris. Power can win battles, but only mercy can win respect. And in the end, respect is the sharpest weapon of all." The young officer nodded, his eyes shining with pride. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy. Not as the strongest, not as the oldest, but as the most human.